Games, a podcast about what's new and awesome in 3D printing for gamers. I'm one of your hosts, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Pam, and I'm joined by.
Christian Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery.
And this week we've got a guest I've been trying to get on the podcast for ages, hopes and dreams to have a someone from Atlas to join us. And so we do. We have Support Monkey, the head monkey of Atlas 3D Support Solutions.
Super cool.
Afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
And how much of that did I butcher?
Oh, not at all. You're great. That's awesome.
Awesome. So, before we jump into things, can you give us the elevator pitch of who you are and what Atlas is and why we should care?
I am the monkey, support monkey Orwell. I don't like to say that I'm the primary founder of Atlas. I got to turn off my phone. I'm sorry. But I was one of the very first people to start doing this, quote, professionally, like 3 years ago. And yeah, we support great art, a lot of it.
It's
every
a great
month.
tagline. It's a great tagline.
That was mine. That was we were kicking it around. Me, a guy named Sin Nerds, and Yesik. We three were the first three. And we were trying to figure out who we were going to be, what our name was going to be. And I was doing sticks, and I'm like, guys, we support great art. And everybody liked it. So, that became our company motto.
And the
Solid.
name, obviously.
So Atlas is an interesting story. Originally, we were not Atlas 3D Support Solutions. When it was just me, Yesik, and Sin, we had a discussion about what we wanted to be. And it was just the three of us. And Yesik was very engineering oriented. And our original framework about how we were doing this was very engineering oriented, thinking about all of the forces at play and everything. So we didn't want to be perceived, or we wanted to be perceived rather, as like engineers. So we called ourselves 3D Support Solutions. Now, one of our early boosters and one of my mentors suggested that 3D Support Solutions was kind of boring and that we needed a better name. And since Atlas was the Greek god that supported the world and we were supporting the industry, he thought we should rebrand ourselves as Atlas. And we didn't agree with him at the time, but when we officially formed ourselves as a company right before 2021, there had been some changes in the organization of Atlas, and we held a new discussion. There were more than three of us at that point, and the new group decided that we would add Atlas to the front. And then as the eldest guy here, I'm like, listen, I know everyone likes Atlas better, but I am making a decision that 3D Support Solutions will always and forever be part of our name. I agree that Atlas should be the front because it sounded better. And so we became Atlas 3DSS.
Nice.
And what does supporting great art mean for any of our listeners that don't quite understand how important your company's role is in most of our products?
Well, I mean, especially when we started, there was a lot of crappy mesh, to be pretty direct. Not well produced, but like it was just, there wasn't skill. There wasn't attention to detail. If I'm going to do a thing, I'm not going to do it by half measures, and I'm not going to expend effort or time on low quality things. It's just not worth my effort or time. And we were very particular about who we worked with in the beginning. We did not just want to work with anyone. We wanted we take great pride in what we do. And it doesn't make sense to spend all this effort and time thinking about supports and how to do them on low quality art. And so, we still to this day, we interview every single artist we work with. And if you don't take your art seriously, we just suggest that maybe you work with somebody else. We're more than happy to teach you how to do your own supports. But it matters a lot to us that what we put out as a company, both in terms of the work that we do, but also the other companies that we support, that's quality work. Because if it's not, it's bad for the industry. It's bad for the market. And I very much want to see this industry grow.
Well, speaking of the industry, how did you get involved in gaming to begin with, and why are you now basically holding up a big portion of this new product?
Well, I'm old. So I've been playing Warhammer, tabletop games, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering since the Satanic Panic of the late 80s and the early 90s.
Oh yeah.
I've been gaming for a very, very long time. Um, and I'm out here in the middle of the desert. The pandemic has happened, and I'm bored. And I haven't been a gamer. This is 3 years ago now. I haven't been a tabletop gamer in a while, other than Magic the Gathering. And my sister's out here with me in the desert, and we're in this giant house, and there's nothing to do. I'm like, you know what? Let's get into Warhammer. I used to play Warhammer back in the day. I got nothing to do, so we drove down to Vegas because I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna buy a bunch of armies. I'll buy an army for me, and I'll buy an army for my sister. This will be good. I knew I was gonna spend some money because I remember Warhammer being expensive, but I got down there. I'm like, oh my god, man. Oh my god. And my sister is like, this is stupid. You should just buy a 3D printer. Now, I hadn't thought about this at all. I'm like, what do you mean a 3D printer? They're expensive. She's like, no, they're not. Like, I just saw this YouTube video about them. Just watch this YouTube video. And I'm not even joking. It's a YouTube video from freaking Greg Kurakawas. Greg 3D Printing Pro is the guy who got me into this with his Anycubic Photon video, because I come home and I watch this Photon video and he prints off stuff to me that looks like Warhammer.
Yep.
And it's the same price as buying an army. And I'm a math guy, so I did the math on buying an army for me and my sister versus buying the printer. I found all the STLs, I found the resin, I got the printer. And in a weekend, I taught myself how to use Chi2 Box watching his videos. And when my printer showed up, I just started printing. And it was unlike anything. I stopped playing video. I stopped everything. I had never had, it was a video game that paid me, is what I used to tell people. Like, doing supports, like, almost immediately, I realized I could do it and not many other people could. And I had a lot of people offer, hey, would you do this for me? Sure, here's $5, here's $10. And then all of a sudden, I got a video game that's paying me. I was an MMO grinder, man. I played 60 hours a week in a professional raiding guild in WoW. So grinding is nothing. And that never paid me. This paid me. And, it was fun and cool, and I had nothing else to do. It was, the pandemic.
Yeah.
And, there's a whole lot of ands in there between then and now. But basically, it was just Warhammer's expensive. 3D printing got cheap. And I was good at doing a thing that almost nobody else in the world could do.
This sounds like a very familiar story.
Yep. It's just, I had a lot of people in the beginning tell me, you're going to burn out. I'm like, no, you're just weak. Like,
oh my God.
I'm sorry, it's true. Like,
and you're
we have something in my family called the Tatum Standard Family of Excellence. It applies to everything. And we are a high functioning family. We don't brook slackers. We don't brook whining, crying, or weakness. Like, if you can't do it, try harder. Are you bleeding? Then you're not trying hard enough. Like, my whole family is this way, multiple generations. We are driven people. So, how did I get here? Luck and drive.
Sure. Well, and interest, I think, sounds like it was.
Yeah. Well, yeah, especially the first couple of months where you're not really necessarily making money and you're learning. Because, the Greg videos got me to the point of like, okay, I can make an object print.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not enough, because you can min-max that. You can make the object print with fewer supports, with less resin, with less marks. Like, there's all these things to min-max on.
You definitely have a little D&D optimizer in you, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
So what were the first two armies you popped off there for you and your sister? I'm curious.
Eldar and Orcs.
Eldar and Orcs. Oh, elves and Orcs. Eldar and Orcs. Yeah. Classic. What did you play?
Eldar.
That's what I thought.
I'm a space elves person. So, space elves and space orcs, it works just perfectly.
I'm pretty sure I have your number here.
My very first paid client was Heroes Infinite.
Mm.
So it was just absolutely perfect, because, like, nobody does, in my opinion, Heroes Infinite has the best space elves STLs. Nobody does better space elves than Heroes Infinite does.
So much so they had to change them.
Yeah, whatever. I feel like that's a badge of honor. If you do it right, you get sued by GW. If you haven't been sued by GW, you're not trying hard enough.
Got no comment.
Oh, no, but that's That's awesome. That's cool. So you also said you played D&D. Like, did you print anything for that, or do you get to play? I know you don't get to play probably as much as you'd like.
Oh yeah, I mean, see, so upside downside there. The first year of 3D printing, I played, and there was fun that was had. Terrain, dragons, various bits and bobs. I mean, that's actually what the first year and a half of Patreon and Kickstarters were. It was almost entirely D&D. It's only in the last 6 months to a year that the market has been like, I would like something a little different now, and has moved from primarily D&D to, I think it's still mostly D&D, but skirmish gaming in general is now a significant portion of what we support every month.
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean, good.
I noticed that like BattleTech and Old Hammer in the very first early days were what you could find files for, and of course the BattleTech stuff wasn't available on premium Patreon stuff because that was just all game rips and fan models. So when you came to actually buying stuff that might get pre-supported, it was like D&D and Old Hammer stuff.
Yep, sounds about right.
So now that you're into this, you got into the hobby. Well, first we actually still haven't told the audience why a support. What is the function of your job? Why is Heroes Infinite paying you money to do things for them? Like, what do you accomplish?
Well, the short answer is that nobody likes to do support work at all.
Right.
If you look on the screen, what you'll see,
we're an audio podcast primarily, so they can't.
Oh yeah, so they can't see this. Yeah. All right. So what I have on my screen right now is a 3D object, and the thing is these 3D objects are, they're 3D. When we think about printing things, most of us have seen a traditional 2D printer, and ink or toner gets deposited on a flat 2D plane. And that is what printing is. In reality, we are actually doing the same thing. We're printing one 2D planar layer at a time. It's just that it's a stacked set of layers, and sometimes parts start that aren't touching the ground and aren't touching the model, and that's where supports come in. There's a bit of jargon here, but there are things called islands. Islands are bits on the model that when you put the model on the plate, they are either not touching the model or they're not touching the build plate when they start. And that is where you absolutely have to have a support. And then then the min-maxing starts, because if you catch only the islands, for very small objects, that might be enough supports. But for anything with any girth or any weight, you have to add additional supports to anchor the model, to brace it in place, especially on some of the cheaper printers that have weak Z-axes that like to shake like they're on a dance floor, or soft flexible resins, or people who insist on underexposing.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot that goes into it, and most of that is the supports.
And if we have any new listeners, these things are hanging upside down also. So there is a weight issue that starts to come into play if it's a big model.
Unless you've got that weird rocket that prints
upside
down into
weird
suspended liquid and then splashes it everywhere.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a mess.
The vertical printing is a nice. I don't think it's going to ever take off just because the issues with leveling.
Sure.
I don't even know how to say this. Like, there's so much innovation in the 3D printing space as a whole, but how much of that can actually filter out to the consumer is where it gets a bit dicey. The only reason any of us have resin printers is because the patents on them expired. And so all of a sudden you could produce cheap commodity printers because the hardware that was in them was never particularly sophisticated.
Right.
The first resin 3D printers used off-the-shelf tablet and smartphone screens. It was over 2 years before we got the first bespoke monochrome screens for resin printing. And even now, Elegoo and Anycubic are only really just starting to make some innovation. Right. Most of what they've been doing is just riffing off of what worked before.
Well, we've joked on this podcast fairly recently that, like, it's almost been literal. Like, every week we come on Elegoo's announced a new printer, and that we have to chat about because the algorithm rewards us when we
Talk with a new thing.
we talk about doing new printers. So like it's does seem to still be in finding themselves, but you're right. Like the patents for these things existed ages ago. Dentists have been using this technology for years, famously on every episode of Beyond 2000 I've ever watched, which might age me a little bit. So do you think that like that patent situation is still choking possible advantage? Should we have been like when third edition was in its prime, should we have been be able to 3D print beholders?
I mean, probably not. Just because like third edition, I do need to go and check when that was, but a big
2000.
part. Yeah, so then no, you're not going to be able to like if you think about the supply chains that are required in order to have a 3D printer sub $400, which is a key market price in American consumer goods. If you're not below $399, you're not going to hit a mainstream market. This is just a known fact. You don't hit that price point without economies of scale in the LCDs. Economies of scale for LCDs of the type required to do 3D printing that we would like, those don't hit the market till 2010 to 2013 at the earliest. Realistically, we got the price points we did because of a combination of economies of scale in the production of the underlying materials and then the patents expiring so that we weren't beholden to the early players.
Okay, interesting.
Who, from my perspective, kind of, cheated anyways, because if I wasn't around for it, but from what I read, it was like with FDM where they claimed to be open source until they made some money and then they retconned everything and they closed sourced it. So, I'm an open source maximalist. I think that the inventor's dilemma is real, but there are better ways to solve it than this ongoing patent system that I think hasn't provided the benefits that it was supposed to.
Okay. We've got a question from the audience from that blasted semiflange, who is saying, Param question. I won't lie. Like most, I dislike doing supports. I'm trying to make objects for my models so that rafts are the actual items, terrain and greeblies. Why don't more people do this? So I guess like there are options for designing models that they don't need supports, but why doesn't everybody just design supportless models or integrating the supports into the design of the models?
Because they don't look as good.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
Yeah, it does limit your design options.
No, I wouldn't even say. I would be much more direct. They just don't look good. If you are going to use an object that can print at 15 microns or less, why would you not use that ability? And if you do supportless minis, that means you can never have an overhang that's greater than the overhang capability of your resin, which basically means 45 degrees, like before you start really having to put supports on to hold stuff from shifting about.
Yeah.
So like in the FDM world, I understand. You're limited to, realistically 150 to 200 microns. I know that some of the ultra guys can get to like 125 or 100 microns with, a really tuned FDM printer. But realistically, you're just not going to get there. So it makes sense to do supportless minis, even more so because the support solutions for FDM before tree supports were atrocious. So, all of that makes a whole lot of sense. But in the resin 3D printing world, especially with 8K and 12K screens, I'm sorry, the market has spoken very emphatically that like supportless minis don't look good because people buy what looks good. I can tell you that much right now. They buy the render.
Yeah.
Like, they overwhelmingly buy the render. You cannot like it, but like...
Oh, we have a clarification. Their minis need supports, but in the rafts, they're replacing them with objects. So you get the model and then a piece of scatter terrain instead of the raft being a flat object.
I do not understand that question.
So I think what they're saying is like, how you have the supports are anchored to the bed plate. Instead of the supports being anchored to nothing, they're anchored to a piece of scatter terrain that can also be used as a product.
Oh, I mean... How do I explain it? The TLDR on that one is that none of the software is designed to connect two pieces of mesh, particularly Lychee. Like with the way that the Lychee system, and understand there are some limitations on what I can describe in terms of how Lychee works, mostly because it's just inference based. If you try and connect two pieces of mesh together via a support, it's going to create a very particular kind of support. If you fuse those two pieces of, or if you save those two pieces of mesh together in one scene as an STL so that you can no longer separate them, it still is going to do that.
Right.
That creates real problems with orientation because no two models are the same. So if you created a piece of scatter terrain that you always wanted me to anchor this thing to, what's actually going to happen is I'm going to use a lot more material and I am going to absolutely destroy that piece of scatter terrain, anchoring the object to the scatter terrain.
Like so pockmarks and stuff, you mean?
Yeah. I mean,
that's been my experience.
That's one of the reasons that you're trying to optimize this is that, like, if you're supporting a model, and especially when you're first getting started supporting models, it's real easy to make sure the model will print if you're willing to cover it in support so that there's no chance it won't print.
Right.
But then you pull the model off, and every place the support touches the model is a chance that you're going to damage that model, especially if it's a big old beefy support. You're going to pull part of the model away when you're breaking the support off.
Yeah, and not only that, it's like one of the things that we teach people when we bring them on to actually, well, this is actually before they get brought on. Everywhere you place a support is like applying an eraser. This is before you get to the part of removing them where you can where you can create divots. Everywhere you place a support, you are deleting information. Everywhere. So if you hit the auto button, sure, you're going to hit print, but every single place that you have a contact, even if you use ultralights, those are little tiny erasers that are going to erase fine details. And in many cases with, like, Lychee in particular, it will put supports in places you don't need to put them.
Right.
So you're wasting material too. Like, the end of the day, everybody wants the model to print. So if you don't put enough supports on it and it fails, that's a waste of resin. But if you put 5,000 supports down when you only needed 500, and 1,000 people print that model, that's like 50 million extra supports, like globally, that everybody prints.
Right.
And believe it or not, that is part of our equation, like, especially as we've grown to a larger scale where it's not hubris. Like, we try to think like, okay, it's not just us printing this. Like, most models, like the dirty secret is most models don't get printed every month over month. Like 95% of things that come out don't get printed. People print the popular items that they see on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, because we're herding species. But
can confirm.
Like, we don't know a priori. I mean, I can run an analysis and guess what models are likely to be the ones that are popular. But it is a guess. It is an educated guess. It's informed by 3 years of watching people do what they do, but it's still a guess. And every month there's a model that I'm like, that's going to be the one, and it's not. And the one that, like, I'm like, that was the one. Yeah, that was the one. Who knows why?
I'm curious, like, if you have an example that's not too telling, like, not too whatever proprietary, I guess, of something that you did not expect to do well that did really well.
Recently, no, because I've been so buried in work, I haven't really thought about it. What was the last time like that would be? Actually from OPR, that cannon. Like, I think it was like 4 months ago. There was just this random cannon. It just seemed like a normal cannon. It wasn't a bad model. It just, like, and the reason that I know that it was popular was because it had an error in the supports. And for 3 months, I kept getting people asking me to fix the dang model, and I'd already fixed it, but they download it and then they don't think to read. Like, it's like 2 months later, like, oh, I'm going to print that cannon now, and then they're in the Discord saying, hey, this failed.
And they're still using the old file, right?
The old rat cannon, the Ratman cannon.
Yeah, I did not expect that to be a popular model, but it was super popular. Like,
I get that all the time with errata. I'm like, this got like, we errated that, like, the second release. Oh. But they,
Honestly, but like there, you're kind of finding things because especially during the early days before My Mini Factory was a thing in in the industry, it was like a whole lot of you downloaded everything immediately because you didn't want to miss out on your models and then have to beg the publisher, may I please have a refresh download link 7 months from now.
yeah.
Um, and then still with some of the stuff we put out about My Mini Factory a little while ago, I'm still a little bit nervous where I still hoard model files and download them right away, but for a host of different reasons. But honestly, it makes the most sense uh, to download the model near the time you're going to print it, if that's a possibility, because yeah, those models do get the first people that print them find out the errors, and then y'all give us brand new files that go back up onto My Mini Factory, and then they get fixed. But if you're printing those first models, you're not benefiting from all the other mistakes that were made before you.
Yeah, well, and then even just like that part right there, getting people to understand that, like, because of the rat race loop that we're all on, there's no way around it. I can print those files all day long. They are going to go out to the wild, and there is going to be something that was missed or something that printed for us that don't print for you. I mean, that is just the nature of the beast. And, you know, it doesn't matter that 90 to 95% of the files that go out print just fine, because it's always that popular 5% that's going to have, you know, something, you know.
Well, and you probably have your printers really dialed in on specs. So like sometimes something that's going to print on a really good, like, or do you deliberately like off spec them so that you can try to test tolerance?
Initially, see, and this is the problem from like 2 years ago. Anybody who's been following Atlas for a long time, like 2 years ago, if you were not calibrated to the exact same standard as us using a very similar resin, you were not going to have a good time.
Yeah.
In the month of November of 2021, I spent more money educating people than I did paying people to do supports.
Yikes.
Yes, and that was the month that we had what we call internally the thickening, where we thickened our anchors. And we kept thickening until the complaining stopped. Now, it hurts internally. It hurts because I know that we are over supporting models now. From our perspective, the amount of supports and the thickness of the supports that we put down, it's over supported from our perspective. But it doesn't matter what we think if the market, like, I'm a market guy, man. I use a lot of market econ jargon. There's a thing called stated and revealed preferences. At the very start of this, the stated preference by everyone was we want models with absolutely no marks on them. So we gave that to people. But there was a cost for that. And that cost was greater than the market wanted to pay. The revealed preference is that people just want models. And they will 100% accept a little bit of model damage. Now, nobody wants, you know, like acne everywhere. There's obviously a limit. But it was a learning lesson for Atlas where we had to put our pride and our own internal preferences to the side and say, listen, this is what we think is best, but the market disagrees with us. And we have to adapt. And we did. And not everybody agreed with that. Not everybody liked that. But, you know, I didn't lose a single client. And I had a whole bunch of them tell me over the following 6 months, we get less complaints now. What'd you guys do?
And I think that's an important aspect to understand. What you all do is, like, you all support a bunch of very popular companies that are putting out these models. And it's important that when I'm supporting a model that I've kit bashed, I only need to make myself happy. And if it's busted, I only waste a little bit of resin, and I don't have to make sure that, you know, 10,000 screaming nerds get their STL fixes and get their rat cannons printed out correctly. So dealing with that's the other humongous service you all provide is, first, you support so many files, and you've helped pioneer what good supports even look like in this industry, and helped educate a whole bunch of people on how to do supports properly. And that's been incredibly valuable to the industry and its growth. But also, you literally support every customer because I mean, the first time I interacted with you was on Titan Forge's stuff when I was trying to print vampires, and I'm like, hey, these print supported things, I'm having no luck with them. And one of your team members literally walked me through tuning my printer and understanding supports and understanding pill force and like some really one-on-one crap that helped me become a better 3D printing professional.
Believe it or not, it saves us money.
It saves you money to
It
walk
saves us
my
money.
dumb butt through.
Yes. Not
How?
only that,
How?
like, well, so it's a twofold thing here, and the most important thing actually is that Atlas did not do the things that you just said. The community did. We learned as a community before Atlas was a thing. Me, Yesik, Jane, Hades, Velkin, we are the founders of Atlas. All of us were just 3D printers who were in the Facebook groups, who were in the Discord groups learning from each other. Like, the only true claim that I say is mine is cloning. I'm the one who found the glitch in Chitubox that changed how everybody does supports. I figured out that you could clone supports because of a glitch. Everything else, it's all from the community, man. We all learned and worked together. It's why we started our Discord. It's why we spend so much time trying to help everybody, because it was people helping us. Like, there was a guy, I can't even remember his name now, Potent 3D. Potent 3D, who, if you hear this, he was a rando who helped me when, there was no Atlas. I was just trying to learn how to print. I met him in the Titan Forge Discord, and I was trying to get my FDM printer because I had bought a resin printer and an FDM printer, and I could not get my FDM printer to work. And this Potent 3D guy, he's just like, oh, man, it's hairspray, bro. It's hairspray.
Hairspray. Yes.
And, I would never have figured that out. And so, that, for me personally, that informed my own ethos. Like, what made me love this community is that there is a community of people trying to help each other, of people trying to learn. And I am a lifelong learner, and I try to help others. So it was just natural for me to just lean all the way in on this community of people who are helping others. And every single member of Atlas feels the same way. We all love to print. All of us love to print. Most of us love to game, and all of us are here to help others because we were in one way or another helped, by the community. And then Atlas changed our lives. Like, all of us had other lives before Atlas. I was teaching school. I have, Jane was flying airplanes. Hades is a PhD dinosaur archaeologist. Like, we had real different lives, and Atlas changed everything for us. And so we try everywhere we can to give back because, we feel very grateful and lucky.
Well, that knowledge is radioactive. Like, Param, you got that knowledge from Atlas, sure. But then you taught me, and I never had to bother Atlas.
And that's why it saves us money.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I've taught a couple people since then. So it's kind of like this. Yeah.
And I'm sure a few people have learned on this podcast too. So it also helps. Yeah. But I do agree. Like, the fact that this is a community is one of the big reasons I love this community. And one of the reasons I got so involved in it is because it's like a whole bunch of really passionate nerds trying to figure out this like brand new tech and how to best use it. And the reward is you get freaking dinosaurs. You get dinosaurs with laser beams.
Dinosaurs with laser beams.
You can make anything you want. Literally anything you want.
I wish more of the hobbyists got into that. Like, I do think that the best part of this hobby is digital kit bashing and sculpting your own stuff. Because it can go from your brain to your hand in an evening.
Yeah, I mean, basically, look at what Midjourney is doing for pretty pictures. And in about a year, you're going to have that for basic 3D modeling. Now, you're still going to have, like, the mesh that's going to come out of it. Like, right now, when I play with the auto-generating mesh, the mesh is crap. It's just, that's not even in the realm of acceptable. It's like, no, it would be no. But in a year, I expect that the mesh that it'll put out will not be like this. It's not going to be like OPR levels of mesh, but for regular Joes who want to kit bash, but who can't do the base modeling parts,
Mm-hmm.
that they're going to be able to solve for. Mesh Mixer plus Blender is just amazing, but the learning curve is insane.
Oh, you just need to know 2 keys. You only need to know E to extrude and S to scale, and then all of Blender unlocks.
I don't know. I'm still intimidated. I'll be honest.
Yeah, man. I can do some stuff in Mesh Mixer, but I have thrown my head against Blender many, many, many times, and I'm still, no.
Yeah, I joke around, but like it is really intimidating. It's that open source software interface that everybody knows and loves, where it looks like the like just the default Java libraries having a freaking barbarian rage attack on you. And if you've ever played EVE Online, that's kind of what the menus look like.
Oh, good old EVE Online.
Yeah, but I do absolutely love the software because it democratized 3D modeling in a world where it was gate kept by $700, $800, $2,000 software. Blender comes around and honestly, in a lot of ways, puts a lot of that software to shame.
Absolutely. Especially some of the most recent extensions that really open up the doors for organic modeling.
And Voxel Forge just called out my reference there, Josh Gambrel, for the tutorials, Blender tutorials. His videos, especially his 10-minute modeling challenge videos, will absolutely make you understand Blender. If that's something you're interested in, audience, to go look those tutorials up. They're amazing.
And Blasted Samaflinge also says Blender's their go-to. So
yeah. Though I do guess most of the professional market is still working in ZBrush right now.
Yes, overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly. The industry practice or industry standard right now for 3D modeling, if you're going to go to like a studio or something, is ZBrush. Yeah. They want Z tools. They want everything individual, all the individual parts, along with everything together as a unit, dynameshed, appropriately decimated. That is one thing that I have been really grateful to see over the last 2 years is maturity in the market. Because again, the quality of mesh that existed 3 years ago, you want to talk about nowhere in the range of printable.
Right. And I will say, of the proprietary software in the world, ZBrush is like one of the least price predatory. It's expensive, but it's not horrible.
Yeah, I mean, give Maxon time. No company spends the amount of money Maxon did without eventually raising prices. Sorry.
So buy it now. Buy it now.
Yeah, well, you can't even buy it, ongoing. What I would say is support free and open source software and support the developers who put that out. And by support, I don't mean just go download their extensions. I mean money. Support means money because, developers have bills too. A lot of people do not appreciate that digital work is still work. You would be amazed at the amount of people who are like, oh, yeah, can you just do these supports for free for me? It's like, hey, bro, where do you work? Yeah, hey, if I showed up at your job and I was like, hey, would you do your job for free for me? What would you say? Oh, you just make toys. Yeah. So can I go to Hasbro and just ask the Hasbro guys, hey, Hasbro guys, would you mind doing your job for free, man? I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah, no. Bro. We got a lot of people who have some very unrealistic expectations in this country that are in for a world of hurt over the next few decades. But for those who have grit and willingness to work, oh man, is there opportunity. I am so excited because of 3D printing and opening up, boutique creation, not just toys.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the Etsy shops that I'm seeing for gaming, like peripherals and cosplayers and stuff. It's just incredible, articulated 3D wings and stuff that do all the motion. It's amazing.
I'm kind of really excited what this means for the concept of manufacturing as we start to see 3D printers becoming closer and closer to being able to meet the same needs as injection molding.
Fourth wave manufacturing. Like to use a corpo buzzword, fourth wave manufacturing. We are almost at the transition state where instead of you guys hearing people talk about last mile delivery, which is what everyone's used to hearing, you're going to start hearing about last mile production. Some of the biggest shifts in in production right now are reshoring, using additive manufacturing and other automatic manufacturing methods to bring factories back into the United States that make use of very advanced 3D printing. This is not, the kinds of 3D printers that we have in our homes.
Right.
But I am someone who has very much drank that Kool-Aid, and I would expect that over the next decade, you're going to see a lot of production shift back into Europe and the United States, North America, actually, I should say, instead of the United States, for that basically makes use of 3D printing and other additive manufacturing. Like it's not just the printers. There's a revolution in material science happening right now.
Well, we've already seen the whole concept of global scale just-in-time production being failing us at such a fundamental level that it basically wrecks the economy for 2 years. So something has to change, and this looks like a very promising option, being able to manufacture your product or even it's one of the reasons that I don't make fun of privateer presses move like a lot of people have been on the YouTube sphere of hey, they're 3D printing stuff and just selling us. No, that's smart, because it means that you can manufacture things where your customers are, and it's so much easier to get product across the ocean when you can email it, and then
absolutely. And you're not warehousing it either.
Well, it's 3D printing, the adage that I've told people when because we get people sometimes who will come to us and ask us to do jobs that don't actually make economic sense. If the amount of units you're making is less than 5,000, it makes sense to 3D print them. If you're making more than 5,000 units, you should not be 3D printing them. You should be 3D printing your master and then using something like Stylecast. There are, you don't need to spend $20,000 on a mold. There are better solutions now. You don't need a factory-sized injection molding system anymore. You can have something that fits into a large office bedroom. But I do see hybrids actually, where you're taking combinations of traditional CNC milling and subtractive technology and using that in conjunction with advanced injection molding technology and 3D printing, both of the SLA and MSLA variety, but also crucially some of the new stuff that is coming down the pike is using, what are they called? They're micro LED displays. So instead of having, just one array, you're going to have a whole bunch. It's like an array of arrays that allow you to do dynamic exposure and shifting. And there are some really interesting potentials for novel resin types that have different colors, that have different material properties. And we won't see any of that for another 5 years because that tech is still in the lab. But it does exist. The proofs of concept have all been shown. Now it's just up to the market to figure out who's going to produce them and how do you cost effectively produce them.
Well, since we've got you here and you seem to really enjoy discussing the advancements and emerging tech aspect of this, what are your thoughts on these new super fast resins ACF printers like the Photon ILM-S and the Saturn 4 Ultras and the Mars 3 or Mars 4 Ultras or whatever they are?
Well, I mean, okay, so I do have a bit of bias. Anybody who's followed Atlas for a while knows that we backed the Athena project, from 2 years ago now, and they've just now released their printer. So, the Anycubic solution with regards to their force sensor does nothing for increasing their speed. And I would say that making your resin thinner and telling people they should print at 100 micron is typical of that side of the world, trying to get one over on Americans who aren't reading the fine print. Resin printers don't print at 100 micron. I don't know how many times that we have to tell that side of the pond that you can print at 100 micron and claim that it's 50% faster. But the moment that anybody who actually resin prints in this industry looks at it, they're going to say, why are you printing at 100 micron? This is an FDM. This is resin. We print at 20 to 50 micron. And if you print on an Anycubic printer at 50 micron, you're going to find that your prints aren't any faster. Now, the ACF stuff I've seen tested by some others. There does appear to be some there. Mm-hmm. And yes, you can make your resin thinner and it will print better. We know this. We taught everybody this 2 years ago when we, along with the community, discovered Vroom. And we let everybody know that the thicker your resin, the slower your lift speeds, because viscous resins don't like to be vroomed. You can vroom them, but they don't like to be. Mm-hmm. So...
And actually, I've been vrooming your resin recently, and I've been giddily excited how well that's been going.
That is the whole point of the resin for us. It's like, okay,
I am jealous.
And again, I don't pull any punches, and I don't, I don't sugarcoat things. There are other resins that other people will like better than Atlas resins. 3D Resin Solutions makes our resins, and there are pluses and minuses to the resins that we make. We obviously like them. It's all that we print with. And I only use Elegoo and Anycubic machines. I have a room full of Saturns, and I love my M3 Max. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm just a general hater of Anycubic or Elegoo. But I have no problem with advertising. I hate marketing. I hate it. I hate it with a passion. And in this industry, we have a lot of marketing and not a lot of advertising. If you tell me the truth, I will buy your product and I will shill it. If you lie to me and you say, we print 50% faster, 100 micron, no. No. So, I love my 8K Saturns. I will probably skip the 12K printers, not least because I'm probably going to buy more Athenas, but I just didn't necessarily see any there that made me go, oh yeah, I definitely want that. Force sensors in the build arms, I expect China to copy Concepts 3D by next year. They always copy good ideas. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I'm not somebody who's shade on them for that. Like that's the pattern. I expect that the force sensor will be copied by next year, and it'll be in the build arm of every printer because that does work. That shaves up to 70% off your print time. That's not hyperbole. That's not marketing. That is the truth. I mean, and the reason that it can do this is because of physics. Like it can tell, I have released from the printer. I can stop moving up. And that alone saves you up to 70%.
Yeah. Yeah, because like now we have to guess at basically we're setting our printers for the very worst possible lift distance needed. Yeah. For every single lift. In almost
all cases, you only need a millimeter of lift height. A millimeter! And most of us are doing 7 millimeters. If you only need a millimeter and you're doing 7 millimeters, that's 700%. Oh, wait, no, it's 1,400% waste because it's up and down. Like... So now don't get me wrong, the Athena still has work. That's why they kickstarted. They have other things that they still need to work on, and Anycubic and Elegoo have economies of scale. They both have billion-dollar endowments from the Chinese Communist Party that Concepts 3D does not have. They don't have any money from the government of Canada. They are a small startup outfit that has been supported by the community and by the Kickstarter. So that's again just me being, all cards on the table. I am biased in their favor, but they do have real headwinds. Although I would encourage everybody to support open source North American companies like Concepts 3D that are pushing for hardware solutions that, in my opinion, are better for the industry. They're more expensive, but hey, we all have to make decisions about the world that we want to live in. And I would like to live in a world where we have important hardware made in North America. 3D printing is a geopolitically important industry on the scale of the internet. And right now, we don't make those printers in North America. Some people might not be bothered by that. Personally, it is the one thing that I would like to see. I would like to see Europe and America making their own printers. I would like to not only have Elegoo and Anycubic. I'd like to be able to have a Western printer in there too, so that I can, we would continue to have multiple printers that we can be available. I would have other companies' printers, but they're not reliable.
Well,
I'm not going to push a printer in my test bed.
Be better.
Yeah. I just want competition.
Mhm.
So, are there anything that you're excited about that you think is coming down the pipe as far as 3D printing, or that you really hope comes down the pipe as far as like cool features or anything that you wish somebody would go ahead and add to their stuff?
On the hardware side, it's basically not really. Maybe it's more than 2 years before we have any serious hardware hit the market. This is like a major revolution. And that's just a guess too. Like, it's not like I have any actual inside hard knowledge on that. I'm just, what is it called? There's a research team out of Michigan that's doing this high rate 3D printing. They got an oil layer, and so there's no retract. It just pulls straight out. Like, I think that we're in a VHS Betamax moment, and VHS lived forever. I mean, it was like 10 plus years before we saw DVD. I think that MSLA resin printing is basically going to be the dominant form of high resolution 3D printing for probably the rest of the decade. Maybe 2026, 2027, there's something new that hits the market. I mean, this stuff takes time. You don't all of these things take a lot of time to build the parts and the supply chains, and there's no rumors of new parts, and there would be if there was anything coming soon. We heard rumors about DLP a long time ago. Voxel Forge micro DLP, I'll believe it when I see it. I still think all DLP is Betamax. It's Betamax. It's better, but it's more expensive, and its production supply chains are not as diversified. And diverse supply chains almost always outcompete mono supply chains, unless the mono has an amazing product. And Texas Instruments hasn't been Apple since the 80s. Sorry.
Yeah.
They're important, don't get me wrong. They do all kinds of great stuff. But they're the only ones who make the DLP chip, and I don't think there's enough competition to drive that price down. And from what I've seen, the quality difference between a DLP printer and an MSLA printer is insufficient to offset the massive price difference.
What about the software side of things? Because I have a guess that you care a lot about the software features that are available.
Well, yes. I continue to think that the best bet is Lychee. Not just because the French and the Americans have been long-term allies since the last war, but just because I think they make the best software on the planet when it comes to 3D printing.
Okay.
I don't think that there's anybody even close, at least when it comes to resin 3D printing. FDM, that's a completely different ballgame, and I don't spend enough time there to have an opinion. But the most hate mail I ever got was when we switched to Lychee, because nobody knew who Atlas was when we switched to Lychee, and so the whole market overnight switched to Lychee because nobody knew who we were. Nobody had any idea that we had captured the entire market in terms of market share anyways. So there were all kinds of conspiracy theories about how Lychee must have paid us off or this, that, and the other thing. And I'm going to tell everybody, same thing I've been telling anybody who ever asks. We switched to Lychee because they listened to us. And when we ask for changes, they make changes. Yeah. We made videos about it. We made posts about it. And at the end of the day, at the start of this, I said the only thing I lay claim to in terms of what I personally did for this industry is I found the glitch in Chitubox that allowed us to clone supports. You can go to my personal YouTube and find the video. I have the Facebook post saved just because the head of Chitubox reached out to personally thank me. And then they broke my glitch. And I reached out and I said, guys, can you please unbreak my glitch? And I don't know if they just don't speak good English, or they didn't care, or they didn't listen, or they didn't understand, but I was completely ignored. And I reached out to Lychee for a completely separate reason, because some Lychee fanboys were giving me a hard time for using Chi2Box. So I reached out to their CEO and I said, hey, dude, control your freaking audience. We're a small community. You need to reach out to your community and tell them to stop brigading into other communities. And he knew who I was. And he was like, hey, now that I have you, what would it take for you to switch to Lychee? And I told him straight, fix my glitch. And the next day, I got a version of Lychee with my working glitch. And 4 days
Is it
later,
still a glitch at that point?
No,
I think
it
it's just a
wasn't. But I mean,
feature.
it's just how it's saved in my mind.
Right.
You know, 4 days later, they had another thing. Then I get introduced to their lead technology guy who does all the development, Julian.
Mm-hmm.
And from there on out, if there is a problem, they fix it. If we have a suggestion, they do it. Like, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, I mean, it's not quite like, hey, do this. We have a productive back and forth dialogue. They listen to the community, and they make good software. Like, there are problems with Lychee, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not saying that there's not bugs and there's not things that they can do better. Cough, cough, memory leaks. Oh my God, memory leaks. But they consistently deliver. They consistently make game-changing innovations. When Atlas fully switched to Lychee, we saw a 30% increase in our productivity.
Nice.
Now, in no world would any business not lean all the way in on a 30% increase in productivity.
Yeah.
We have continued to dominate this market because of our partnership with Lychee. Because the tools are bespoke for us. We get updates before anybody else does. Like, I would be insane if I didn't appreciate the competitive advantage it gives us being able to influence the direction of the software. Like, so that biases me, but it's also, I challenge anybody to give me somebody who has spent more time doing 3D printing than me at this point. 16 to 20 hours every day for 3 years.
Wow.
I haven't hit 10,000, so I'm not a master, but it's been a long time. And I'm not the only one. Almost all of the Atlas founding group, it's 16 to 20 hour days for 3 years. We know
So
what we're
close.
doing. Yes. Yeah. You know.
Well, before we let you go, this is definitely going to be a spicy topic, I think, because I know you have a lot of opinions on how to do supports properly. What are your opinions on auto supporting's place in the industry? Does it even have a place?
Oh, it does. We have, like, I made a bet. It's one of the bets that I had to pay out and lost on. I thought auto supports were already going to have eaten us.
Really?
Yeah. I actually made a fundamental error in sussing the difficulty of supports. I still, though, expect that auto supports are coming to eat me. They have to. They have to. At the end of the day, they will. And the reason that I know this definitively is because I've spoken with many high-end resin miniature makers who all use high-end 3D printing. And at that level, where it costs you $14,000 a year for the subscription, and it's per user, per printer, they have supports that never fail, and they will do anything. I know that this exists. If I know that this exists, then it is merely a matter of time before that enterprise market decides that my market is worth their time. Right now, it is not. And so I can be the manual monkey who puts sticks on things. But there's a reason we started trying to do resin. There's a reason we are trying to make our own art. Like, because I expect at some point auto supports are going to eat us. As it is, that 30% increase in productivity is a function of using automated tools. Now, do we use the auto support button? No. Do we use support from Island? On occasion, but mostly no. But the Island Finder did not used to exist. We used to have to, like, there was no Island Finder. The support projections, which allows us to project supports directly onto a flat surface, that's a form of automation. That saves us quite a bit of time. Support painting, it's a form of automation. Saves us a lot of time. My new prior is that automation like this is going to continue to put downward price pressure on how much I can actually bill per model. But at the end of the day, somebody still has to print the thing. Someone still has to make sure that the machine didn't mess it up. And someone still has to help manage the community and teach people how to 3D print. Because
Right.
for at least another year or two, it's not going to be just hit the button. Now, the Athena, again, to be a bit of a shill, when we have enough data on that force sensor, we will also be able to do dynamic exposure. So right now we can do dynamic lift, and we can do dynamic weight. When we can do dynamic exposure, we no longer need, like, we get really close to fully automating the entire loop, where you as a user, you just hit print and you pour your resin in and the machine figures it out on its own. Both of those forces are going to create an environment where it will be possible to finally create a standardized support structure that just works, because the machine will overexpose the supports to guarantee that it works.
I guess you're right. That's probably coming. I have one parting question, because I know we're running out of time. What do you think is you're working with the most unknown, underrated, like Patreon or creator out there that you think people should know more about?
Oh God, I can't answer that question. That would be unfair to my clients.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
We have always done our level best to be absolutely fair to all clients, big, small, or otherwise.
I totally respect that. I was just wondering if maybe
yeah,
somebody was new on the scene, but
yeah,
we do like people getting discovered. So, but that's okay.
absolutely.
I can totally respect why you wouldn't answer that. No, it's fine. I think your
I'm
answer.
trying to think, like, who could I give you that would be fair? Because we have a lot of small ones, and so it's like if I name one small one, I can't name just one small one. The mediums and the larges won't care because they're sustainable.
Right.
You
don't have to.
I'm sorry. I appreciate that. I just don't want to be unfair to anybody. I would say that
all the respect for that answer.
Our creative partner list on our website is up to date, I think.
Okay.
And so if you go to atlas3dss.com/creative-partners, you'll see everybody who we work with.
Okay, fair enough.
Or if you go to our Discord, we have an advertisements channel. And we get a lot of people who are brand new artists who post in there.
Okay.
There are, yeah.
Well, that'll be a great tool for discovery. So
yeah, we try to.
Their Discord.
We are, how do I say this? We are very keen to help new artists get into the market. Like the more new artists there are, it's twofold for Atlas. As more artists come into the market, that brings new people to print into the market because there's new interests that are being met. More people printing means more resin. I sell some resin, so I win there. If new artists get jobs and make money, that shows other artists that they can make money and make jobs, so they come into the market. And then they hire us. So it's like it's a positive vicious cycle. If we can help artists get exposure, have cheap supports, it sounds.
I think that's fantastic. I like it.
It's not BS. Atlas cared very much about doing this as cheaply, as quickly, and as fairly as possible for everybody to grow the market. A growing market is better for everybody, for the consumer, for the creator, for the studio. Studios should be allowed to make money too. They have to put capital up in order to pay artists. Like, a lot of people don't appreciate, if you work, and you know this, Christian, because you were talking about this during the pre-show. If you are a contractor, you have to deal with a whole bunch of nonsense. Working for a studio is a whole lot easier. You don't have to manage the taxes, unless you're a freelancer for a studio, in which case that can kind of suck too. But like, if you actually have a 9-to-5 with a studio, that is comparatively less stressful. Somebody has to finance that capital. Capital costs are real, people. Like, it's real. Like, yeah. I'm sorry. I will rant about that kind of stuff.
No, that's okay. I think you gave us a great answer, and we pointed people to a new place to discover some artists. So I think it's all win.
Go to Tribes too, people. Holy crap, go to Tribes. And sort by lowest number of tribers. I'm not paid by MMF. Like, but seriously, go to Tribes. Sort by 0. And you were going to find a whole bunch of creators who have less than 50 patrons. And let me tell you, your $5 to $10 a month that you give to that patron who has thousands of subscribers, I love those patrons. Some of them are my biggest clients, so please keep giving them money. But also, those smaller patrons would really appreciate your $5 to $10 in a way that maybe the larger ones might not notice.
Right.
Before we go, I have to correct us on a fact. It has since been pointed out to me that you can still purchase a permanent copy of ZBrush as of today. It
Wait,
costs
really?
you $900, but you can still purchase it. They don't advertise it. There's a tiny little link you have to press called perpetual licensing under the subscription plans to find it. But once you do, you can give them $900 to get your permanent copy of ZBrush.
Does
Well,
that come with updates?
Yeah, I was about to say.
No,
like,
you'll have to
isn't
pay
that-
for your updates.
Yeah,
We're back
that's
to
$900 for
$1,600
1 year.
Photoshop days.
Yeah, yeah.
Oof, oof.
Yeah, sir.
Well, see, now what I will tell you though is that like on the Photoshop thing, we have the amazing generative fill tool and some truly spectacular neural engines inside of Adobe Photoshop because of like I am very sensitive because I spend a lot of money with Adobe. I'm sensitive to the realities of creators having to pay a lot of money to Adobe. But I do feel that Adobe as a company, it comes very close, in my opinion, to doing right by their user base and developing the software. It's not like we're dealing with the same Adobe Creative from 2006. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, Adobe seems to react. Somebody who has to pay Adobe a lot of money very, very often. They seem to react to every time a competitor gets close. Suddenly, that software gets
much better.
mad features, like DaVinci Resolve coming up and eating the YouTuber market from them, and then all of a sudden, Premiere's getting all these glorious features I wish it had had for years.
Right.
yeah.
So competition is great for every market.
Yes. Yes. Hey, speaking of which, is a parting note, because I know this will be a nipple twister. If you want to solve the problem going forward, friends, of piracy and AI on artists, the solution is the blockchain. I'm dead serious. Provenance is how you prove things. Now, I'm not talking about monkey JPEGs for $10 million. I'm talking about super boring distributed ledgers, my friends. Not the Web3 mumbo jumbo you hear on the news. Just boring tech that allows you to know from whence things came and ensure programmatically that everybody gets paid. And I would encourage people to actually look into this, because if you don't, you're going to have Disney, Warner Brothers, and the other big media companies continue to own it all for another century. And we'll have reboots and part 4s and part 10s of the same franchises that we've all seen since we were children, with no innovation at all in the media space. So unless you want the same tried and true characters for another century, please support open source development, support decentralized solutions. Like, please, pretty please.
Alrighty. Well, we have run out of time on that note. That's going to be a very interesting last note for us to end on. If you want to find more from you, where should they go to learn more about Atlas 3D Support Solutions?
Discord.gg/Atlas3DSS is the base place. We live on Discord. Like, it is the place. All things Atlas, discord.gg/Atlas3DSS. Otherwise, our website, I am a bit of a one-man band when it comes to actually running the Hydra that is Atlas. So most of the time the website is up to date, but I think right now I might be a little bit lagged on some of my my blog posts. Atlas3DSS.com.
And if you want to find more from us, you can find us over at printergames.com. We're on youtube.com/Param, facebook.com/printergames, twitter.com/printergames, and all the other social places. You can find the podcast at wherever you're listening to it right now, as well as Spotify, iTunes, Google Music, Amazon, all those places. If you want to help the show out, the best thing you can do is leave a comment on the YouTube video or a review on any of the other platforms. Otherwise, spreading the love helps us reach more ears. Until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
I'm Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery, and don't